Hello. Recently I got a message requesting a particular video on a particular subject. Now, I have to say I don't usually do requests because I find it puts me in a little bit of a it sort of implies an obligation to talk about something at a given time, whereas I'm a bit more spontaneous. I tend to talk about things as they come to me. But the particular subject at hand, I think, is a relevant one, and it's one I probably would have talked about anyway. Without further ado, the issue at hand is this arrest of Tommy Robinson. I think a brief explanation or a brief, I guess, introduction of Tommy Robinson is relevant just for anyone who may not be familiar. Although I suspect most people watching this video will know who Tommy Robinson is. Um, so basically, Tommy Robinson is an English right wing activist um, who purports to stand against the threat from pan Islamism. Now, a lot of the things that Tommy Robinson raises are very legitimate issues. I do believe that. But I have never endorsed the particular approaches that he uses. I certainly don't think he's at the same level of threat as an Islamist terrorist who would blow himself up or drive a vehicle into pedestrians. But I don't think that Tommy Robinson's approach is particularly helpful. I'm going to go into more details about that. But I think it is important to look a little bit at this case as to why Tommy Robinson's been arrested, because his supporters and people who are wavering are seeing him as poor Tommy Robinson versus the overbearing state. And actually, it's not quite that simple. A little bit of context. So Tommy Robinson, his actual real name is Stephen Yaxley Lennon. He's from Luton. He's in his mid 30s. Real name is that important? It's important on some level in terms of accountability. It's not illegal to change your name. It does happen, but it is somewhat important in terms of accountability. Now, back in about, I think it was 2009, Tommy Robinson was the co-founder of the English Defence League, and he was motivated to set that up after seeing Islamists disrespecting the Remembrance Day poppy parade through the town of Luton in Bedfordshire, which is basically a war memorial that we have in the UK to commemorate the end of the First World War. It's a very sacred event. So this understandably angered a lot of people, including Tommy Robinson, who then decided to set up this sort of counter organization against the Islamization of Europe as they saw it. The problem is, by his own admission, the English Defence League started becoming a kind of blood and soil neo nationalist, basically racist organisation. This is what he himself has contended because he left the organisation. He said that he started seeing aspects of white supremacy that he wanted nothing to do with, that didn't represent him, so he left. I just want to say on record, I do not believe that Tommy Robinson is a white supremacist. I don't believe that. But nor do I believe that his approach to these things are particularly helpful, and I'm going to explain why. Now, what Tommy Robinson has said, that he is basically saying the same thing that sort of more, let's say, people deemed to be polite society are saying as well, but they don't get the same level of criticism. And one contention there is because he's a white working class man. That's why he gets more criticism. There may be some truth in that. There may be a certain snobbish aspect to that from the chattering classes. But what's happened outside Leeds Crown Court is that Tommy Robinson was reporting on, well, he says he was reporting on an ongoing case involving grooming gangs. About 4 years ago, it began to emerge that we have a serious problem in this country with grooming gangs of South Asian heritage, primarily British Pakistani men, targeting vulnerable young white girls. And this was endemic in towns like Rotherham, Rochdale, and more recently Telford. And it's been in other locations as well. Now, one of the biggest contentions of this is the utter failure for the authorities to really act on this. And the contention is that that was because of political correctness, because of the perception that if they acted, it would be seen as racist because they were targeting British Pakistani men. The real racism actually was the fact that these predators were targeting these vulnerable young girls because they were white, and they had a racist mindset that they were therefore easy. Now, there is an aspect of the theft that automatically gets into a sort of defensive mode with this, and they automatically think you're talking about grooming gangs, it must be racist because there's white paedophiles as well. And they point to, for example, Jimmy Savile and the cover up that the BBC was accused of over all of that. Well, what I would say to that is, of course, there's white paedophiles. Nobody is saying that the only paedophiles and the only predators out there are Asian men. That would obviously be wrong. And it would obviously be inflammatory to say all men of South Asian heritage are predators. But there is a problem. And this isn't one or two individuals, this is organized grooming gangs. Now, Tommy Robinson has been very vocal on this along with others. He came to my city, he came to Sunderland. Um, and you know there's real anger out there at the failure for the authorities to act. There has been a few lone voices within, let's say, the establishment. There have been Labour MPs like Sarah Champion and Anne Cryer who have bravely tried to do the right thing, but they have been stigmatised shamefully by their own party for pandering to the far right when all they're trying to do is their job as MPs. Um, Yet Naz Shah, another Labour MP, who liked a tweet actually trying to shame the victims of sexual violence, try to put the blame on them. She actually liked that tweet. She never got reprimanded for that. Now, that to me is deeply concerning that she would be sympathetic to that sort of mindset. Yet Naz Shah, is in Jeremy Corbyn's shadow cabinet. Um, So I really think that there is a real problem here with honesty. And it does infuriate me that the regressive left simply will not refuse to accept that there is a problem because their go to is, oh, well, yeah, these men are bad, but, you get white people. It's always whataboutery. No one is saying that there aren't white pedophiles. No one is saying that there aren't white predators. But the point here is these cases got scrutiny, they got attention, and they raised controversy precisely because the authorities did not act because of the perception that they would have been seen as racist. It was moral cowardice, really. The difference is, yes, there's white paedophiles, but the authorities aren't going to be worried about racism, are they? That that contention of, oh, what about if it's seen as racist should not prevent justice being done. That's the contention, and that's what the regressive left need to understand. That's why it's different. That's why it's getting attention. So, to get back to the case, because this is very important, I came across a link called The Secret Barrister. A friend of mine who has more legal knowledge than I do. She's not been in the legal profession, but she has close friends who are. Anyway, she left this link, and it really goes into significant detail as to why Tommy Robinson was arrested. Now, his supporters immediately said that the UK is turning upside down if Tommy Robinson is arrested, but for too long these evil men who have preyed on young girls haven't been punished. And certainly on the surface, that would appear to be the case. I still think that on some level Tommy Robinson is a soft target. However, and this is important, he is not as innocent as his supporters are claiming. Tommy Robinson was given a suspended sentence for contempt of court. Now, in the UK, contempt of court is a serious matter. He was initially arrested for breach of the peace. What he was actually doing was accosting the defendants as they were entering the courtroom outside Leeds Crown Court. Now, however strongly you feel about the case, to be clear here, Tommy Robinson isn't personally involved. It wasn't his personal relatives. So, you can't put it down to emotional, that he was a personal victim himself. He went there accost these guys, and you could say they deserve it. I'm sure they do, but that is not the point. The point is it disrupts due process and it disrupts court proceedings. That's considered a breach of the peace. Now, the contempt of court issue, as I understand it, comes about from the fact that he was trying to interfere in a live case, and he presents it as reporting, but reporting is not shouting out, you know, trying to accost the defendants. Reporting would be simply reporting, and that's not what he was doing. Furthermore, Tommy Robinson knew full well what he was doing when he went there. So to sort of play the how awful that they're arresting me line, he knew he was going to be arrested. He knew that. Um, so before people feel too sorry for Tommy Robinson, I would urge you to look at this link and look at it point by point. It really goes into great detail um, as to why he has been given this suspended sentence. Having said that, Majid Nawaz made a good point. Majid Nawaz, Tommy Robinson have a somewhat checkered history. Majid Nawaz, if you don't know, is a commentator on LBC Radio. He's a former Islamist himself. He was never convicted of terrorism offences, but he did in his youth with Islamist organisations. Now, he's dedicated his adult life to exposing Islamism and to speaking out on these issues. And Majid Nawaz was one of the first public figures to say there is a problem with British Pakistani grooming gangs. Other guys have, to their credit. I mean, other British Muslim men have, but unfortunately, they are a minority. Too many people, it's a wall of silence, like, oh, you're stigmatizing the community, and they prefer to play the victim rather than acknowledging that there is a problem. So Majid Nawaz made the point that when the so-called polite society, the chattering classes, the liberal establishment, whatever you want to call it, when they will not address these issues, then people like Tommy Robinson will avoid. I don't believe that Tommy Robinson is a racist, but I do think that the approaches he takes is not particularly helpful. Um, More often than not, he just throws himself into the limelight. I think there's a bit of an ego thing going on there, but I think that um, his defenders need to understand that disrupting court proceedings, you might think, oh, well, he's just calling these guys what they are. But the point is, all that does is disrupt the trial. It prolongs the trial. It makes it harder, or it prolongs the victims getting justice. It doesn't actually help anyone. That's what you need to understand. That's why he's been found in contempt of court. And he knew that. He knew that when he went there. So why did he do it? Um, So I don't quite buy the poor Tommy Robinson as victim line. I don't think it's that simple. Um, I would ask you to look at this link that I'll put in the video, The Secret Barrister. There is more to it. Now, one thing I do think was a mistake was that uh, there's uh, there's a formal name for it. I forget now, but the so-called media blackout. There is a formal name for it. I think that was a mistake. For a few days, it was forbidden to basically report about Tommy Robinson. I think that was a big mistake because it lent to the narrative that he was a victim, and I think it was a mistake because it prevented journalists from showing the full picture here as to why he was actually arrested. That would have deflected earlier conspiracy theories about, it's a state out to get Tommy Robinson, etc. I do think that it would be good had the authorities acted as quickly on these sexual abuse cases as they had to apprehend Tommy Robinson. I think there's something to be said for that. So, on some level, I do think that Tommy Robinson is an easy target, because he's a white working class right wing activist. So, the authorities never have to fear any charges of racism in tackling him. So, I do think on some level that's an issue. However, and I must admit, I was one of those who thought, oh, well, this is total double standards. Why is he being arrested? But there is a bit more to it. Tommy Robinson did actually commit an offence. However, and I'll make this as a sort of final caveat. Um, yeah, he should face some consequences because you can't just go around disrupting court proceedings and think that's completely fine. Otherwise anyone could barge into a courtroom and say, "Oh, that person has done this. and I'm a reporter. You can't do that. There has to be due process, otherwise it disrupts the whole judicial system. But having said that, I fear that we still haven't really learned any lessons. Still, shamefully, Jeremy Corbyn's Labour refuses to accept that there is a problem. I think that is utterly gutless. I think it's a disgrace. That's not every single MP, by the way. There are good, decent MPs out there who know there is a problem and they've tried to act on it. But Jeremy Corbyn and the moral cowardice at the top of his party just will not um, acknowledge that there's a problem. And yes, of course, there's white paedophiles, etc. But the issue here is it is a specific problem in specific towns. This is a reality. It's not just one or two isolated cases. These are organized grooming gangs who are specifically targeting young white girls because they see them as easy. And likely they were motivated in part because they felt the authorities wouldn't act, which is exactly what happened. So it's frustrating and it's tragic, and it should not have happened. Um, and it is frustrating that apparently, even today, the sheer stubbornness of the regressive left to not acknowledge this. Saying that there is a problem with Asian grooming gangs is not the same as saying all British Pakistani men are predators. That would be bigoted, that would be wrong. But saying there is a problem with Asian grooming gangs is factually correct. So, what Tommy Robinson is saying, this is the problem. There's nothing wrong with that. It's the way he's going about it is the issue. And that's what I would ask people to consider. I'll put a link to The Secret Barrister. Let me know your thoughts.